We're talking all things China. Did I say China kind of like Donald Trump says China? Because if I did, that's a big no-no. But for me, China, and for the world, China is an amazing civilization. It's an old civilization. It's a very, very diverse country with many different types of people, many different languages. It is the most populous country in the world. And it also has a reputation for anti-blackness. So I want to dive into all that. I want to hear about this fabulous sister from New York. I want to hear her thoughts and opinions. We're going to listen, we're going to learn, we're going to educate ourselves, and most importantly, we're going to be inspired to just do more and go beyond what our normal comfort zone is. So if this is your first time to my channel, do not forget to like and subscribe. And what's up, y'all? What's up, O Squad? Welcome to another edition of Black Women Doing the Most. And as you guys know, this is probably my favorite time during the week because each and every time I get to connect, interact with some of the baddest sisters on the planet. And today is no different. We are talking to a beautiful sister. And y'all know, like, I always like, is there like a litmus test when I do like these shows? I know I just changed from podcast to vlog, so you guys get to see these sisters too. But I'm like, I don't have a requirement. Like, usually I just, reach out to people on the internet, but everybody who's been on my show, I'm like, dang, I gotta step up my game. These sisters are gorgeous. And Nicole's no different. Y'all will find that out. And she's doing the most, y'all. And guess where, y'all? In Shanghai, okay? And I'm excited about this conversation because of everything that's happening in China right now. We're gonna get the tea on that and find out what her experience has been like. Because particularly as me as a Nigerian, I got lots of questions. But two, because like if you think about like the history of like just Shanghai in the world and like all the movies and it just that has like this, I don't know, je ne sais pas associated with it when you think about the big cities in China. So we're gonna find out about that. But then we're just gonna find out about all her experiences because this sister is well-traveled. She is doing the most, like I said, and of all my guests, like she is the one, she asks the most questions, which I always appreciate because when people ask me questions, it makes me better. So I'm gonna stop rambling because I never ever do my guests justice in their introduction. And so I always just like to pass the baton to her. And also sister is working to be a mindfulness coach, which if you guys know from my other vlogs that mindfulness is something that I'm like, everybody needs in their life. So girlfriend, I'm gonna pass the baton to you. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself properly because Jackie O rambles.
I love it. Thank you, Jackie O, for having me. I mean, I feel equally thrilled to have this conversation with you. You speak a soul language through the internet that I definitely connect to, and I'm happy to be here. An educator for 16 years. I'm originally from New York, Caribbean background. My family's from Jamaica, and I taught in the UAE for 5 years, and I just completed my first year teaching in Shanghai. And as you mentioned, looking forward to being a mindfulness coach and mindfulness speaker and talking all things, spirituality, getting our mind right, and just, achieving all the things that we desire using our intuition as well. I think it's a key part that we often miss out.
Yes, sister, yes. And when you sent me your bio and I saw that portion, like, well, one, I was like, oh, people gonna get on me because you're probably my fourth or fifth New Yorker that I interview, and they're gonna be like, Jackie, why you New York bias? I'm not New York bias. I'm just saying, no New York girls, they get out. I'm not judging
Yeah.
y'all. I'm not judging nobody else. but but I do want to, just because one of the things you mentioned is like soulfulness and you living your soulful life and mindfulness. And I want to talk about, because I feel like the biggest pushback or the biggest questions I get in my DMs from people who either listen to my show, follow my blogs, follow my podcast, etc., is getting over the mental hurdle of leaving the United States. And what was that like for you, and how did you do it?
You know, it's funny because sometimes I feel like I was kind of like built for it. And I know that sounds like very bravado to kind of say. And I think it's because the shock of moving abroad. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I feel like the first year, it took me like 1 year to actually, for it to hit me that I actually left.
Mhm.
I don't think it's like this immediate thing because of the adrenaline. You're getting your visa, you're getting a job. Like, I think it almost like the moment like didn't catch up to itself until like a full year. So I don't think I had that time to immediately think about the fact that I was leaving. To me, it was like, wow, like I'm being bold and I'm doing something that no one in my family has done, in a sense of just like going to work, you know, in a different country. And at least recently, because I never want to discount my grandmother who left Jamaica to come to New York to make a better life for my family. So, but I just think in this time period where your parents want you to work hard, get a degree, and do all these things, and here I am like, oh, I just think I want to just like move overseas. I think most of my time was consumed with that thought, that it never really hit me until like maybe a year, and I was like, oh, like I'm really like not in America right now. Like I'm wearing a scarf on my head so people don't see that I'm a baldy. I am wearing abayas. And then in those moments, like especially because I was working in a rural area outside of Abu Dhabi in the beginning, I think that's when it would hit me. But especially because my first transition was to UAE, where they have a lot of American products, you kind of get caught up in both worlds, because in one aspect, there are things that are very familiar to me in terms of like food, in terms of the fact that everyone speaks English for the most part. So I think that was like a very smooth transition. However, when you're like out in the, you know, in the rural settings and you see like all you see is sand and desert, then you're like, oh
We
yeah,
gotta
like
back
this
up.
is not New York.
Everybody in my audience doesn't know where the UAE is.
Oh, yes.
So we gotta break that down for them too.
Yes, sorry, yes, the United Arab Emirates. So we say it's in the Middle East, but it's right there by Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Jordan, like all in that vicinity, is where we call the Middle East. It is not in Africa. I know some people, it is still part of the Asian continent, which most people don't realize, but yeah, it's that small like conglomerate. Most people tend to know Dubai. Dubai just became really famous at one point. I happened to be there when all of that was happening. And yeah, so that's the area that I started my expat journey.
And you were in a rural area. So like tell us about that, what that was like, because people have
So
misconceptions about the Middle East. So break it down for us.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I actually lived in the city. However, my job was 45 minutes in the rural area. So essentially working with, I guess like when you think of the first inhabitants of the UAE, which you call like the Bedouins, like, so, and yeah, so in those areas are very, I won't say underdeveloped, but compared to like where I lived, it was totally different. Like, I mean, I don't even know how I would describe it. Like they almost like mini castles, but even though we're seeing it as a castle, they were probably medium, like middle class, maybe a little bit lower middle class. Like I was told that that was the area where a lot of the divorcee families lived. Now to us, like of course, when we see a house, if you're from the city, you just assume something good. But then my colleagues would let me know, like, okay, these are like the divorced families tend to live out here, and that, you know, maybe the people that have maybe more money would probably live within the city of Abu Dhabi, or maybe out in Dubai, or in, yeah. So it's so interesting.
Because it is,
Yeah.
you see a house, you know, normally like think, okay, somebody got a little something.
Right. It's quite, yeah. It's such a challenge to even understand it, even if I compare it to even living in China too, because we have like these ideas of these societies, and then you really have to get your foot in the door to know someone of the culture so that you could actually have full understanding, which I feel like I'm being more intentional about with living in China now versus when I was in the UAE. I think that it's so easy to take for granted living in a country, and you could like live somewhere and not take the time to really get to know or understand the culture,
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. And I think there are whole expat communities that just live in their own little enclaves and never really venture out to find out what the country they live in is like.
Yeah. It's really hard. And I think, of course, in the UAE, it was harder because of, religion
Mhm.
and being a little bit more, I would say, stricter in the way that they would interact with foreigners.
Oh,
Of course, you get invited to, I would say you're invited to the wedding and all of that, but at least my experience, I didn't get to know everything that I want. I wanted all the juice, whereas whereas here in China, I do feel that I can get close to someone who is a local. And I feel like, I think I can have a better chance at building a real relationship,
Mhm.
and to know more, because it's not so cut off,
Okay.
if you will, as I experienced in the UAE.
So you did 5 years in UAE as an educator,
Correct.
and then you moved to China. Which
I
was
know.
that a cultural, like, what was being 5 years in a place that's relatively like conservative, you would say? Would that be correct to say?
Yes, correct. I
Okay.
mean, I know that I have other friends that work in other Middle Eastern countries, let's say Qatar or Kuwait or Oman, and they would, of course, say that those are more conservative. But just generally speaking, if we were talking about just like religion and just like the things that are allowed socially or culturally, I would definitely say conservative if we were to compare it to China by far.
Okay. And then, like, what was your process even getting to UAE? You had in your mind that you were ready to leave the United States, and then you just went for it, or did you have? Did you have a connection to UAE? Like, what got you out of the door?
I did not have a connection in the UAE. However, I don't even remember what I was watching or what I heard, but I know that someone mentioned like living overseas and just like the income potential in the UAE and the tax-free living. And at that time, I had student loans and I heard tax-free living. I was like, oh, this is easy.
Oh,
I was like, how much? And I already had 10 years under my belt in New York City. I already had my master's degree. So, and I was actually in a relationship at the time. However, because it was moving forward, I just felt like, you know what? Now is better time than never later, And also what really sealed the deal was watching that Steve Jobs speech. And that famous commencement address, like, I felt like it spoke to me. And I just felt like I didn't want to be a teacher. I think that part of the bad rap that teachers get is that they always say they teach things that they never felt they could do, kind of thing. I mean, I've heard this before, and I thought that I never want to once again like stand in front of a class and tell students what they can and cannot do. And I can't even say that I've done that for myself.
mhm.
And I think that really propelled me to go to the UAE because of the income potential. I would knock out my goals. I did join some Facebook groups. And then one young lady, she would always respond to me. So naturally, I just felt like she wants to help me.
Mhm.
So I personally messaged her on Facebook. And then coincidentally, she was also from New York. So when she came to New York, for one of her breaks, she actually met up. We had brunch,
Oh,
and it
that's
was so
awesome.
sweet. Yeah. And she kind of gave me that like good like encouragement to feel like, because now I'm like speaking to someone that's actually there. So
Yeah.
now it's like, okay, this is great. Her name is Ashley. If she gets to listen to this, she really helped me a lot.
That's so-
And right away after that brunch, and I just signed up. I was hired nearly immediately.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, like it was crazy. And like my family thought I was joking when I was like, yeah, I'm moving overseas. Like, what? And this was like in a text message. This wasn't even like a formal. They're like, Nicole, you going through something? I'm like, no, I got some loans. I want to travel. I want to live my best life. Like, let's do it.
So Nicole, I got a real deal like New York question for you. Do you feel, because I I've interviewed like a lot of New Yorkers on my show. And this has not necessarily been intentional. It just so happens that like people I see on the internet that I think are fabulous also happen to be born and raised in New York. But do you think because you're and like I know my viewers and listeners are like, if she don't get over her New York trip, do you think because you were born and raised in New York, and New York is such an international cosmopolitan city, do you think that predisposed you to being more open to moving abroad?
You know, I would say yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, because I think it's partly yes, because just being around different cultures. So the idea of embracing and being around new culture doesn't scare me. So I would say yes in that aspect. But then the no aspect, just because I get it all the time, is that New York City is such an amazing city. So people always say, why would you want to leave?
Yeah, okay.
You know, I think that when people don't really like where they live or they're not really crazy about the town, it always makes sense if they're like, oh, I just decided to move to this city or move to this country. But because New York City is so amazing, and I still feel that way, even with all my travels. And I tell people I also had a really great teaching job. Like I love the school that I worked in. I was working in the South Bronx. Like people often think that you have to be running away from something. And I feel like that was my blessing. Like I didn't feel like things were really horrible. And I was like, you know, I need to escape. You know, it was like, oh, I just want to like make sure I fulfill a desire. And that's really what propelled that.
Nicole, thank you so much for saying it, because I know there's somebody out there who needs to hear that, particularly that you don't have to necessarily be running away from something. You can like also just you want to do something different, and that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be you're miserable in your current state, that like your family said you're going through something. No, I just I want to try new things.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's what I tell people. And I think for me, people were looking at me side eye when I got to the UAE, like, oh, you from New York? Like, I didn't realize there was so much division. Like, even just like in the US, depending on North, South, Midwest. And I won't even lie too, I did throw a lot of shade too, because I do think when you're from a big city, you just have certain expectations for people and just, so I'm not here to act like I was perfect. But I think I learned just like how different we are, even when we live in America, you know, and that's Black and white, you know, just like based on your experiences, based on your adversity, challenges, and just things that I'm accustomed to, what they're not accustomed to. So I think you also bring that with you as well, when you move overseas, for sure.
And do you think you got that appreciation from living overseas? That like we're different. Even in the US, we're different. Like people's perception of you as a New Yorker is different. Like
100%. And even when I was in the UAE, and even still now in China, like I'm not finding a lot of people from New York. So when you do, you just kind of hold on tight. Like you look forward to that like connection. I found that when I was in the UAE, people were from down south, particularly Georgia, people from Florida, Texas. Yeah, and here in China as well, in terms of like the Black community, I would say a large portion. I've met people like that are from Detroit,
wow.
and I'm trying to go through my Rolodex, but mostly usually from the South. I find that to be a trend in my experiences. Yeah.
Now I gotta go. We're gonna talk a little bit more about like UAE, then we're gonna flip to China because I'm so
I
interested in
know.
hearing more about China. But like I know another question and you started to touch on it, so I'm just gonna go a little deeper. Connections to Black people in the UAE. What has that been like? What has your experience been like? Are there Black
Oh,
people?
in the UAE, oh, there's so many. There's
Okay.
so many Black people in the UAE. There's a Black people in the UAE Facebook group where you could easily, you know, join, as well as, you know, Black Americans abroad. You'll find that many people, yeah, a lot of Black people, a lot of sororities. I'm not a part of any sororities, but there's also a big group of sorority and fraternity members in the UAE. So it's very easy, even when you don't know someone, because the UAE is relatively way smaller than, let's say, Shanghai. You can go to a party party and see a familiar face, either from just like Facebook. You find yourself saying that, like, I saw you on Facebook. Because, you know, when people comment, like, you kind of tend to, like, if they have a picture that looks really realistic to who they are at the moment, like, you'd be like, oh, wait, I saw you in that Facebook group. Or you, like, you kind of feel like you know them. You do the head nod, like, yeah, I see you, you know. So I would say that the community is pretty tight. There's a white party that happens every April. Like, literally every single Black person that is hiding under a rock or that doesn't go out, they all come, and it feels like the massive, like, family reunion. It's so cool, seriously.
I know when I used to go to Dubai a lot for work, there used to always be, like, at least Dubai. I'm not know about the rest of UAE, but they used to always have yacht parties.
Oh, yes. Yes. Always a yacht party. Yes,
Okay,
I
okay.
agree.
I was like, is this the thing? This is how you guys roll? And it's like, yeah, well, you. I was like, oh,
Yes.
okay. And, like, I went skiing in Dubai. Go figure, in a mall. Like,
yes, I did that too. Isn't it great?
what is this? It's 100 degrees outside. Like, what is this?
Yes.
Okay, so no, I'm glad you spoke about Black people in UAE, because I know that is a big question that I get asked. I mean, people are always wanting to know, will they have a sense of community if they go to a new spot? But I want to switch to China.
Yes, let's get there.
Like, you've been there a year. You were there during, like, COVID-19. You were teaching. Like, yes. You are a sister. And it's a huge city. So first I wanted to, like, transition from UAE, New York, UAE to Shanghai, and what that has been like. And then I want to hear about because you're still teaching, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, your teaching experience. I want to hear all, girlfriend, all of it.
Sure. So definitely I got to Shanghai through a recruiter, actually. And I tell everyone, I did not know how I ended up here, because I was totally like, you know, you get so accustomed to the UAE. I was ready to leave the UAE. However, I was very, like, gung-ho about going to Colombia.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. And then this recruiter was like, oh, you should go to Shanghai. You're from New York. And they had this thing about, like, Shanghai being in a big city. New York is a big city. And what I did, actually, because I was very hesitant, because China is massive. There's actually a language barrier. I don't speak Chinese yet. And I can ask the recruiter, I was like, are there any Black people there? Because I didn't really hear Black groups about, like, China. So she connected me to a young lady. I never met her, but I just emailed her, and she kind of, like, laid my anxiety to rest. Like, she's like, it's okay, I've been here, you're fine, or whatever. So then I was like, all right, let me give it a try. And now here I am, teaching again in a middle school. And it's been such a whirlwind. I definitely think I'm in that space where I'm now finally settling in. And as you said, like, being here as a newcomer and then being here of COVID, it just feels like so many things that I've had to kind of,
it's almost
like digest.
Years. Like, it's almost like you've been there 15 years.
Yeah. Like, talking about, like, adjusting and just, like, and I feel like I'm one of those people, like, because I was in the UAE, I find myself trying to be conscious of not saying it, but it's like my my expat experience. So trying to find, like, me having an open mind with everything that's here, and, like, what do I have access to and what I don't have access to. Like, there are a lot of similarities, but it's just been, I don't even have the words to describe this year. Thankfully, I started at a school that offered a lot of support in the beginning.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was assigned a mentor. Things are pretty different in China compared to the UAE, in the sense that, like, for example, like, we have to do fapiao, which is like taxes. The UAE, I didn't have to do taxes. So I get taxed out of my salary. Like, so having someone to show me how to do that process weekly. There is a real deal language barrier.
Are you teaching expat kids, or are you teaching actual local kids?
My school is, I call it international-ish, because there's an international side and there's a Chinese side. And the international side, all my kids are foreign passport holders. So let's say America, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And the reason why I say ish is because when a school is fully international, they abide by their own rules. And the reason why something like that is important, because it really reflects like what they do, let's say COVID. So for example, when COVID took place, they had to wait to hear what the Shanghai government decided, and then they have to figure out a way to follow through. Whereas if it was a truly international school, they can make their own demands of what they're going to do and not have to follow the guidelines of the country.
Oh, very interesting.
So so like, let's say the Shanghai government says school needs to go online and it needs to begin March 15. Maybe our school might say March 17, but they're going to have to abide by the rules so that we have to teach online. So like, that's what happened for me. Like, we had to teach online, and then eventually we had to go back to school, where a lot of international schools did not go back to school. So they continued online for the rest of the school year. You understand? Whereas for me, because they went by the Shanghai rules, I had to go back to school April 24th. So I had to go back to school, and that also impacts like days off and whatnot. So here I learned this. So let's say we're off for a holiday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. When you work for a school that is international-ish, or like it's not an international school, you make those days up. So that might, I know, clutches pearls too.
Yeah,
Exactly. So that might mean that I might make up like a Saturday I might work, or a Sunday. Exactly. So it's like not really a day off, but like those are like these small things that at least I didn't really understand, like being in a true and people say true international school versus like international-ish, because they have to go by the government.
Okay.
And then that really impacts you, because obviously if you're in an international school, because it's going to be mostly foreigners, they really try to make choices that are going to be most beneficial to the foreigners. Versus if you're in a school that international-ish, you might fall in right in between, right? Like, I had a friend who his school gave him a substantial, like, I guess, like, cash bonus, if you will, because of everything that was happening. And that might not be something that you might experience if you're in like a international-ish school. There might be certain perks that you may not have, and it kind of hurts when you hear it from someone else and you're like, dang, like, really? And this is not me complaining, this is really just like these small things that you learn while you're
like, if somebody wants to be a teacher abroad, these are
right. Definitely.
I would want to know that.
You definitely want to know that. I mean, and at the same time, being here during COVID, I think was also a blessing. Like, I went home the beginning. So we have Chinese New Year, which is roughly a month off. And I actually started so it happens like January 19th to like the second week of February, off for that entire month. And I went home. I went to New York for like a week or two, just because it's a habit. I want to go see my family, want to get anything I need. And then I happened to come back in the mid of COVID. And of course, my family, again, looking at me crazy. Nicole, why are you going back? Blah, 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 you know. And I was like, I want to go back. So I did come back here, and it turned out, obviously we saw what happened when it happened in the States, and I was so happy to be here because there were certain parameters and things that happened here that made it smooth. I would say there was no like extreme lockdown like what's happening in the US, but it was more so where we had temperature checks. There's a QR code that I still use to this day, and it basically shows like within the Shanghai that I have not left the city. So you'd have to show this no matter where
you're on your computer? I mean,
it's an app. Yeah, it's like an app. I can try to open it up and just show. And you have to show that every time that you leave. So let's say I even leave Shanghai tomorrow. It is mandatory by my school that I'm here before school begins in August, because it will change color. So it's like green right now because I've only stayed in Shanghai. We have to wear a mask on the metro. Before it was everywhere. You had to wear it everywhere. But right now it's pretty much the metro, if you're in a taxi. So because of these like these rules that were set up from the very beginning, people just kind of adhered to it right away. And many places were closed. And if it was open, it would be like, okay, we're letting 5 people in. I don't know if you know, there's Costco here that recently opened. So like Costco was like, okay, we're only letting 100 people in at a time.
Costco, which is
I was just there yesterday. Yeah, Costco is like the only like field trip in the world. But yeah. Yeah, so I think because of those things, it really helped. Now, of course, the downside was that I was inside my house for very much every day. And I feel like even people in the States, you know, we could all complain about just like staying at home and a cabin fever and just like, you know, and because of you add the pollution situation here too. It's not like every time you can just want to go outside to get like breath of fresh air, because that's not always the case. So like I have an app as well that lets me know the intensity of the pollution situation. So I think just being bogged in the house after a while, it just started to get really just like, okay, I'm like ready to go outside. Like I'm like itching to like ride a bike and do those things. But I've just found that it was very easy to just adhere to those rules. It was very quiet here as well.
And Chinese people actually adhere to them too, because people in the
Of
US
course,
ain't doing
of
that.
course, of course.
Okay.
They don't play. They don't play at all.
Okay.
Yeah, they had the mask on, and I mean they're notoriously known for like spitting and caulking. I mean, just a big. It was so happy to not hear that for like all these weeks. Everybody had their mask on.
Nicole, thank you for keeping that hella real, because people need to hear these things, like, aren't necessarily things you know, like, right? Like,
Yeah,
so normal.
yeah.
So
So
Nicole,
it was.
so you were stuck inside. Like, people gonna ask me, like, what's it like living? Like, what is actually your living situation like? What is housing like in Shanghai? Like, 'cause people have no idea. They just
Okay, so I'll
moving.
use New York City as a reference point. So like Shanghai is like New York City, like Manhattan. And like where I live is like the equivalent of like I'm from the Bronx, funny enough, but it's like living on the outskirts of the city.
Mm,
Um so for me it takes me roughly 45 minutes by train to be like in the city. Like if someone wanted to visit me and they wanted to go to like the Bund or Shanghai Tower, it would be a 45-minute train ride. I live among Chinese people. There are a couple of foreigners, like people that are from my school that live, you know, where I live. I live in like a complex of a couple of buildings. It is part of my housing situation here. So they give you like a stipend and they give you a choice. Not all schools do it differently. Some schools just give you the money and then they tell you can find your housing. Some students, some will offer the opportunity where they'll give you the housing, and then sometimes what people do, maybe their second year, now that they have their foot in and they feel comfortable, now they know where they want to live.
okay.
So my housing is pretty much covered. I think I may pay the difference of like $100 that comes out of like my own pocket. I have a 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony, pretty modern
Okay.
compared to like most apartment buildings. With my school, I am very fortunate that we have a shuttle that takes us to work. We have that option versus like taking the metro, which is also an option, or just taking a taxi.
Is the
Um,
metro like, is it equivalent of like the New York Metro? Is that like what those?
yeah, but cleaner. Yes, but
Okay.
way cleaner for
I'm like,
sure,
oh,
for
the rats,
sure.
the rats.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't see rats. No, we don't see those. It's like nice and clean. But yeah, I love my home. It's very nice and cozy. I do think they try to find a way to make sure that you're comfortable. My other option was to live right across the street from the school, but I didn't want that. I felt like I need the separation.
Mhm.
But going back to what I was talking about, international school, you'll find that other schools will give even a larger housing allowance. So if someone listening right now and they're thinking about, that might be a question you'd want to ask. I feel like because I came here being so open, I didn't have that many demands. And not to say that I don't have any standards, but I didn't have that many demands. But I find that I've met people that really want to live in the city, like the Shanghai, which obviously is way more expensive than living like where I live. So that's kind of the questions you may want to ask somebody, because you don't want to like come to a school and then you're like all in the outskirts and then you feel like you're so alone, because it can easily feel alone when you're not in the heart of the city,
Mhm.
in terms of just like being near the coffee shop or just like those comforts. Sometimes you don't have that when you're outside of the actual city, I'm finding.
So it's funny because you did the reverse in Shanghai that you did in when you were in UAE. Because UAE, you left the city to go outside the city, and,
Yeah,
and here you live outside the city and
yeah.
go and work in the city, right? In like in the heart of.
Yeah, yeah. I
Wow.
think it's because I have the metro. So to me, having a metro, which I didn't really have in the UAE, and like having a taxi if I really need it, I don't feel as limited.
Okay.
And it could just be stages. I think also when you move overseas, like it all depends on what stage you are in life and what you're desiring at the moment. You'll find that one aspect, one moment, one thing is like really important to you. Like when I went to the UAE, it was all about like money and just like paying off bills. And not to say I don't care about money, but for me, it was like my soul needed a place where I can vibe and I be myself and not worry about having to cover my hair and just coming into my own and my next career. So I knew that this would be a great place for that. You know, they love entrepreneurship. There's a lot of, you know, workshops and activities for that. So I think also knowing where you are in your life will help to then choose like a country and then a city in the country and all of that. It's like all kind of works together.
No, that makes complete sense. And that's some amazing advice to give to people. And it goes back to like mindset, right? And just being
Yeah.
okay with like your why. And that's what I hear you saying. Like when you were in UAE, you knew your why. Like you wanted to make like bank so you could like pay off your student loan. And
Right.
that is real. I know I have student debt. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to, after coming back to US briefly, decide to go back abroad again, because it gave me the
Mhm.
opportunity to like pay off student loans, which like that is a
Yeah.
horrible feeling to have when you know you got a lot of student loans, right?
For
Like,
sure, for sure. You just think, you just feel so free. And I know it's something even just as Black people, we don't even get to say often, like to feel free.
mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
ab-
mean, it's just like it like brings tears. Like when you could think that you can just get up now and just like I could legit like go to another country and just start again.
yes.
Like that's
Yes. And that's freeing. That is truly
oh
freeing.
my gosh, so freeing. So yeah.
Okay, girl. So now we got to talk a little bit, because some of us have seen like the reports, especially with like Africans in China during like COVID-19. So like, what has that been like? What has it been like being a Black person? Because I don't know, when they see you, what do they perceive you as? Like,
For sure. It's funny because I had a conversation about this earlier today. Definitely you get stares. Luckily I live in Shanghai, so it's like a major international city. So I'm only talking about Shanghai, and I think it really changes and depends on the city you're in, right? So if you're in a smaller city or a smaller province, then it's just definitely gonna be far greater than my experiences. But definitely when I'm on the metro, like you see people trying to sneak and like take a selfie, take a picture of me
okay,
pointing.
okay.
Um, I've been like out with like my boyfriend one time standing and like a guy definitely stopped his car and came out, was asking if he could take a picture of us. So there's those moments where you really feel like a spectacle, like you're in a zoo. And then I think what makes it worse is because of the language barrier. I think that it's one thing when someone's saying what they desire, but when people are looking at you, you can't really communicate. It can make the situation can go really bad, right? Because all you see them doing is pointing. Like you don't know if they're in admiration. You don't know if this person really means you well, or if you don't know if this person's looking at you and just like want to take pictures because they want to put you in a museum.
Mhm.
And I think that you end up trying to gauge that. And I tell everyone, like, there's some days when I'm just like sweet and I'm all peace and love. And I'm just like, you know, here for the pictures. Sometimes I'll be funny and I'll take out my camera, take a picture of them too, just to be like
Uh-huh.
sarcastic. And then there's other moments when I'm like, no, like Mayo, like I don't want to take a picture. Like, no, like this is not what we're going to do today. So I think it often just like, and if it happens here in Shanghai, which is a major international city, I could only imagine and I would believe what it looks like in a smaller area where they really not like have access to like people of color, you know? And it just gets annoying sometimes, like, you know, especially when you just have your own day, your own agenda, something you're trying to accomplish for the day, and someone's up in your face trying to take a picture. Like, bruh, like, please, you know?
And I think, but I also think it's important you said, like, because I think people don't appreciate that there are like major cities in China. There are outside of like
Hmm.
Beijing, there are huge cities. Like,
For sure.
and can you just speak a little bit to like Shanghai for people who like don't know? Because you keep saying it's a cosmopolitan international city, which is
Yeah.
most people when they think that, like they think China, they think Beijing, and then they think maybe
No, Shanghai is like New York in a sense of it's, I don't even know what the quote, is it like 10 million? I don't know. Like it's a crazy amount of people here. A lot of foreigners here. It's where people come to make money. And like they have a lot of metros. There's a lot of Western places in terms of like going to eat, a lot of rooftops. So give you that feel of like a city where you go downtown and you have some drinks, lots of restaurants. There's a couple of, I think there's 2 or 3 Michelin star restaurants here. You have a Disneyland here as well. Most people know that. You have a good amount of museums, which I'm really loving. There's a Lincoln Center for my New York people. There's a Lincoln Center Jazz here as well. I've gone to one of the events there as well. And because it's this major city, there's like there's a lot happening all the time. Like you can never get bored here because there's always something happening. Almost to the point where it's overwhelming. You're like, what? This is going on Tuesday? This is all happening on Tuesday? Like, this is not for the whole week? Like, and everything here to pique your interest. I mean, literally everything under the sun, I feel like it's here. And we use a communication device called WeChat. It's kind of like WhatsApp, but you can, make payments on it. People have WeChat groups based on interests. So you can just, and people, they meet you, oh, you might be interested in this group. So like, as a result, you're in so many groups. I'm in a yoga group. I'm in a motivate group. I'm in a podcast group. I'm in a Black American group. I'm in a Caribbean group. I can go on. You get my picture. So there's just so many things to do. And I think that's also what's helped, like even now with the fact that I can't really leave China with all that's going on. I mean, it's been helpful. And I'm really happy that I'm in Shanghai of all the cities because there's just a lot to do here. So I'm not completely bored.
Yeah, no, and that's important because I think people are afraid, like, if I leave the United States, again, it goes back to like mindset, like, what will I do? I get that question a lot. I'm like, there's the world, like, there's so much to do. And there's so many places that, like, you wouldn't expect. Like, again, people think like Beijing, maybe they saw the Olympics happen there, so they know that city. But anything else in China, people don't even realize how big China is. Like,
It's massive.
Yes, like, massive.
Like I could literally live here 3 years and spend all my vacation just traveling throughout China because there's so many things to see and everything is spread out. Like if you're in Beijing, you're going to the Great Wall or Tiananmen Square. If you could go to Chengdu, you can go see the pandas. You can go to Xi'an if you want to see the terracotta soldiers. I mean, like there's so many things to do. There's Yellow Mountain, there's Mongolia. I mean, like there's just so many things to do that it doesn't even make any sense. Like you could legit just be like, oh, what are you doing? I'm going to China. I'm going to travel in China because there's so many things to do.
Now let's talk a little bit about like the food. Have you gotten into like legit Chinese food? Like, and tell us about your experiences eating there.
So far, I've only had a lot of Sichuan. I'm probably jacking up the name, but it's that's a part of China. They're known for spicy food, which I absolutely love. Could be my Caribbean upbringing, so I really like it. Yeah, I really like it. I feel like that's all I've had thus far. I know it's kind of crazy. I've had a couple of, there's like in my hood, I call it my hood because it's like, it's my hood. There's this, when we first got here, they go into the fridge and then they take out the vegetables and they literally just put it on the grill. Like people just call it grill. I don't even know what they call it, but it's a very Chinese thing. Like they just literally just take it out and put it on the grill and you just eat it. Chinese people love vegetables, which is always good.
Yeah,
so I've had that. The only thing that I'm waiting to have is hot pot, but it says always best to be enjoyed with a group of people. It's essentially kind of like when we think of hibachi in the States, how you cook the food. But a lot of communal eating I find here in China, as many countries, I find this idea of like eating together. So I think if you're not in a group, like it takes away from the whole experience of like, it's not like the US where you just order a plate. It's kind of like you're ordering a bunch. So until you have like a group of people, and I think that's probably why I haven't had a lot except for the Sichuan and just kind of like Chinese fast food, which tends to be like noodles.
It's COVID-19. You can't be doing the group eating.
For sure. Yeah. That's another thing too. Being just conscious of like what you're eating, and you'll be surprised how your body changes as you go from different areas, and like certain things like irritate you or things don't digest well, or so that's also another thing too, just trying to really be mindful of all those and sometimes you don't know what they cook with or what they're using, especially when it's like street food. And especially with COVID now, you just kind of look at food preparation in a whole different way. Not saying that that's what caused it, but you're just super, precautious now. You're just like, okay, wait, am I gonna have this street food out here? She don't have her gloves on, or like, because that's common here. Everywhere there's street food,
Now, when you're at home, are you able to make your own comfort foods that like make you feel like you're home, like home?
Not as much. Like thankfully, I had brought some like Jamaican curry home from my last visit, but I sure wish that I had bought more stuff, because certain things that I found were so easily accessible. Like, let's say when I was in the UAE, like I've been missing sweet plantains forever, and I have yet to find it here.
They don't have it.
Yeah, I don't see it. I've been looking, and crazy enough, there's a Caribbean restaurant, I should say, in Shanghai. I mean to text her because she said she would tell me where she gets some of her things. But so I haven't really been having, like, I've only made like curry chicken, like, and that's it. But I feel like I had way more access in the Middle East to certain foods. I find myself keeping it really basic. Thankfully, my boyfriend is like a chef, so he likes to play around a lot. I mean, thank God.
You getting good food. You getting good food, though, girl.
Yeah, I'm getting good food. I won't lie.
She's like, oh, I don't have to, like, I don't know about all that stuff. I don't have to. She did it in a very polite way, but like, now I got it.
I'm giving him a subtle shout out,
That's all good. So I want to talk again, because you're in a big city. I want to talk about like transportation. You mentioned like the metro, like the subway, but how do you get around? What is that like? What do you feel safe getting around? Do you take the subway late at night? Give us the 411 on transportation.
Okay, so first of all, I can't really speak to any Android users, but what I do love about having an iPhone in China specifically is that there's a part on our app that it says like the Apple Maps. And once you put your location in it, it gives you a very detailed, like what train to take. Because I was so paranoid in the beginning, because every time when I would go someplace, I would have someone go with me because I was scared that I would like not know Chinese and get lost. And then I was like, wait, how come no one told me about this part on the phone? So now, because it's so good, like down to the exit that you need to leave, because the metro stations are often so big, so it'll have like several exits, and it's not like I think of New York where you just get out to the east side. Like you can literally get off one side and feel like you're on a whole other part that you're not looking for. So when you're getting off the metro, you'll notice it'd be like, okay, exits 1 to 3 this way, exits 5 to 6 this way, 9 this way. So the app is so good because it'll say get off at exit 1, which I find to be very helpful. Now, because I told you I live on the outskirts, the metros don't run 24 hours like New York City. It like runs until so certain stop, like mine would run until 10 o'clock, let's say.
Early.
Yeah, it's really early. So that means that if you're like downtown, you are going to take a taxi home. I'm afraid to say, I definitely feel safe, but just like any place else, and especially as a woman, like if you drink, it just makes sense to have people with you. Because I know that when I got here, within the first 3 months, there was a young lady who was raped by a taxi driver. And I think the guy and they don't play here because, there's cameras everywhere. So, and obviously she was able to report it. The person was fired. I think they went to jail, and it was very big in the Black community because it was actually a Black girl.
Okay.
Yeah. And that obviously allowed me, I was actually not thankful it happened to her, but it allowed me to realize that, okay, yeah, this place is very safe, right? But things like this actually happen, and though I didn't get to go to the community meetings, but like everyone started to have like a system where, let's say I'm going somewhere and I tell this person, because one of the things when you move overseas, especially if you're by yourself, is that though you don't have the comforts like if you're home to like, oh, Susie, I'm going up to the street, like you're by yourself, and things like that can actually happen. Sometimes you need to have a partner, even if they're not your best friend, just to say, okay, I'm going to X this place, like just for safety reasons. So that always allowed me to just say, you know what, like this place is safe, but clearly if this can happen, I need to be really cautious. I have to make sure that, if I'm drinking I know how many drinks I had. I know that, you know, I'm with someone or to text someone or we're going to all take a taxi together. So I was pretty frightening. I mean, my day to day, I always feel safe, you know, but I do think there's like this city, New York, whatever, that I'm always like looking people aside. Like if I feel like someone's creepy or coming behind me, naturally, like I go a different direction or those type of things. But I haven't felt that. But I'm aware that these things can happen, though.
Yeah.
You know.
I think that is like the key, right? Like even in environments that are safe, like even like our little small town in Guatemala of like 14,000, which ain't nothing
Mm-hmm.
compared to the cities that
Right, right,
you live in,
right.
right? Like that it's also camera, like also has cameras everywhere. Surprisingly, given how small it is, but still, like I mean, I'm actually more scared of the dogs because there's roaming dogs in the city than I am of
Mm-hmm.
people. But I still like there's the good thing about being a single mom and then there's the bad thing. The good thing is that like people are always trying to help you and look out for you, right? Because they see you
Mm-hmm.
as a kid. But then there's a bad thing too, right? Because you're an easy target because you look vulnerable. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I'm
And I
always
think
yeah. Go on, go
no, I'm
on.
sorry. Continue.
No,
No,
no.
I was going to say, and even that too, there's a certain sense of vulnerability that you have as an expat when, depending on your personality, where you may not be accustomed to like telling people your business or telling them what you're doing, but like in these situations, like you have to, you know, like you might give someone your extra spare key, God forbid they haven't heard from you,
Yes.
um, or those type of things, and like those are the things that you don't even think about at all, you know.
No, you are spilling some wisdom here, and I think that I haven't in my previous vlogs and podcasts, I haven't really talked about safety that much, and not the
Mm-hmm.
idea that people should be scared, right? But the idea that like no matter where you go in the world, but particularly when you go where you don't necessarily have a frame of reference, you don't have a support system, you just do have to be very intentional about
Mm-hmm.
keeping yourself safe, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're in an unsafe environment, but
Mm-hmm.
opportunities present themselves and most crimes are crimes of opportunity, right?
For sure, for sure. I agree. I agree so much.
Yeah, so I thank you for just putting that out there and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
keeping it hella real. I mean, people are always asking on the show, Jackie, should I sugarcoat things? I'm like, no, like be super
Yeah.
honest about like what your experience is. Like I know I love living abroad, but like there are things that you just got to take into consideration and bad
For
things
sure.
happen. Like bad things.
I agree.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
do.
yeah,
They
yeah,
really do.
stuff, and you gotta deal with I mean, bad things happen in the U.S. too, right? Like
A
we,
hundred percent.
we look at the crime statistics there, and you're just like, wow, like I guess I technically am safe anywhere in the
For
world.
sure. For sure. Absolutely.
So like so I gotta ask because I know you're baldy, but like somebody's gonna ask me, where do you get your hair done? Where do you get it
Oh,
cut?
I'm going for a cut tomorrow, funny enough.
I love your hair. I love it. Like,
Thank you.
but somebody's gonna ask, where do you get your hair done? Where do you get it cut? What are the possibilities for Black women in Shanghai? So,
Okay. Well, Shanghai, I'm still navigating that. Thankfully, I am a woman that shaves her hair, so it's pretty easy. But right away, once I got here and I was on WeChat group, I was like, I think it was like a basketball group or like a group where a lot of men, and of course, like I posted like, where are you guys getting your haircuts? And some of the costs like were so high. I'm just like, bro, like I'm not paying $60 to get a haircut. Not when I cut my hair every 2 weeks. Like it's not happening. And thankfully, one of my colleagues I noticed during orientation, I noticed she had a short haircut and she'd been in China for a while. I was like, oh sis, like, you know, where did you get your haircut? So she links me with this Kenyan guy here in Shanghai. And yeah, that's who I've been going to since I've been here. I did bring my own hair color, my box hair color from the States, because I kind of learned my lesson from being in the UAE. They didn't have my hair color. And I've been
oh,
just trying to survive off of that.
okay.
I hear a lot of mixed reviews about Shanghai in terms of like people to do their hair, like other women that like braid their hair. And I've heard very negative. I don't think there's a lot of like, I haven't heard like a really great positive spin on just like finding someone that's really good. Maybe they're getting braids, but the braids falling out like after a week and all of that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it doesn't seem exciting in that respect. So I mean, if you're a person that does hair, you should definitely come to Shanghai. Like, I feel like people think that they should only be like teachers, but there's so many other industries, and especially when you're an expat, that you desire, and you realize that it's not here. Even just getting like hair products,
Uh-huh.
whether it's Cantu, like I like Cantu, and I paid up like double the price because I didn't bring it from the States. Um, so even things like that, like I would say, stock up on your, if you have things that you really use,
Okay.
or that's mandatory, don't leave home without it, because you'll find that it'll be a struggle. And that's in both UAE and in Shanghai, or you're just going to end up paying the price. And like, who wants to pay twice the price when you could have probably purchased 2 bottles to last you, you know? But people are helpful though. Like, people will definitely point you to people, especially like if you want to get makeup, you want to get your hair done, they'll point you, but you may not always find it the same level that you might in your back home with the person that you were accustomed to. So it's kind of like a trial and error.
Okay. But you
For
have
sure.
been able to find like black makeup. Have you been able to find products without like skin bleaching? Like, what is that? What has all that been like?
So because everyone kind of informed me of that, I made sure that I purchased my skincare, my items at home. That's what I did. Like, I just stocked up when I went to Sephora, so I wouldn't be like in need of anything. So whether, I don't really wear makeup per se, like I got specifically because I was moving to China, and I would highly tell this to anyone that's coming to China. I made sure that I looked up things that had a lot of serums for like anti-pollution,
Mm,
because the pollution is so bad, and it takes out all like the peptides in your skin. And not that I'm like a skin blogger or anything, but if you want to like stay youthful and all of that, like the pollution really gets to your skin. Even though you're covering your nose, your face is still exposed. So that was the only thing that I did differently from being in the UAE, where for me was more about oils because of the dryness of the heat. But here it's really the pollution. So I find myself finding a lot of products that have water base, or just like Drunken Elephant. I mean, I'm not a sponsor, but I'm just telling you what I use.
mhm.
So I found myself looking for anti-pollution
If
creams.
the pollution's really
Um,
bad,
it's bad. I mean, I hear it's worse in Beijing, but like today was really bad. And the thing is that like at first I wasn't really observing it, because when you're in something you don't realize, but I was like looking out, and I have a balcony, and then you notice when it's really bad, you can't even see like the other buildings ahead. But like when there's no pollution, you could see for a distance. Yeah, and it can get really bad, and I'm not asthmatic, but these are the things that you start to think about, like you're breathing, and then it's already bad. You're wearing a mask already, so having the mask on, which then you breathe in back in yours, then you mess your skin. It's just a whole lot of. So I would definitely say, if you're coming to China or coming into an area where pollution is a thing, like looking up skincare, or maybe finding new ways for your skin regimen, because it's definitely going to be different than, let's say, if you're in another country where you don't have to worry about pollution levels.
well, your skin is looking gorgeous. So whatever you're doing,
Thank you.
whatever you're doing,
Thank
everybody
you.
audience follow her. Like if you go to if you go to China, because her skin looks fabulous. So you're doing something.
I
You're doing
appreciate it.
you're doing something
Drink
right.
a lot of water. You gotta drink a lot of water too. You gotta drink a lot of water. That's another thing.
So the final thing I want to just cover with you is just healthcare, and what is healthcare? What was healthcare like in UAE and healthcare in China? Because I know somebody's going to ask me about that.
Okay, well, for my school, for sure, healthcare in China right now, it's pretty amazing. I find that with most, well, at least here in China, I'm all of my doctors, everything is like for foreigners pretty much.
Mhm.
And what that means is like it's your like a really lovely like facility. Like you could tell they go all out. I pay like 50 kwai, which is the equivalent of was it like $10 maybe when I go for my copay.
Okay.
When I go to the doctor, one of the things I do like that's included is that we have, which I just started trying, is acupuncture, and that's like covered in our insurance, which is like so cool. I actually went today. My first time trying is in China. Yeah. I find that, I haven't really had any major issues where I've needed to go to the doctor per se. My gynecologist, she is awesome. She was educated in the States. Her husband's in the States. She's Chinese. So I love it because she's like a local, but at the same understand your needs. Very kind of like upfront, I find here. Like there isn't any like, I haven't had any issues yet.
Okay.
I shouldn't say yet. Yeah. And when I was in the UAE, pretty much the same, similar full coverage. But if I were to be really honest, is that sometimes you don't know if these people bought their degrees in the UAE. And not all, but like some, like that's like always the joke, because they would like diagnose you with certain things. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Like, nah. Like my Google search is about to be better than what you about to tell me. So, and then that comes with like your intuition. Like you have to sometimes know yourself, because it's so easy to go to these professionals and you be like gassed up. Like you're like, no, this is not it. One thing I will add though, what I love about my insurance, same thing with the UAE at the end, is that I have a global plan. So I can go to doctors if I went home. Of course, certain doctors specifically, but I like that, idea that if, let's say if I was home for the summer, for example, and something happened to me, I would be covered. Dental's only covered like a certain percentage, and eye coverage isn't covered. But that was the same experience I had in New York, in the UAE. So I think that's like a thing nowadays. They don't want to cover. Wait, I'm lying. In the UAE, my eyes were covered. Like it was like a certain percentage they gave us, and then you had to pay the rest. But yeah, no complaints in terms of health insurance, I would say.
Okay, no, you have given people so much information here. I'm so thankful for your time. I'm sitting here looking like what could I do in the like UAE and Shanghai? I don't know about Shanghai because I don't know about the pollution. I got a toddler.
Yes.
But I'm
Yeah.
like, what could I do in the like? I like hot weather. I like dry weather. I'm like, what could I?
Yes, yeah. Yeah. And both cities like love entrepreneurship. I feel like I've watched a lot of Black people thrive and like start like businesses out there. I mean, and I think that's also one of the hidden gems in living overseas, is that you can really recreate yourself or give yourself a chance at something that you wanted to do. I find that both cultures are so inviting and opening. Well, more so China, because like they know we all have like the goods, if you will. Like they want to see the new thing, and they're open to like hearing what that is. So
And it's just one final thing I gotta ask you about China, and then we're gonna like wrap it up. And that is like dress style, fashion, like what you wear every day. Like what is a typical day in terms of like dress like China? What's the weather like? People don't realize it can get cold in some places.
oh yeah, there's seasons here.
Yeah. So
And right now, yeah, we just finished, I guess, up like plum season, which is like lots of rain, but it's like really hot. A lot of humidity. I would say like you need to invest in sneakers. I mean, if you find the most comfortable, cute sneakers, because even though I have some heels, I find that I could walk in heels in New York City easily, but not in Shanghai. Like you will be in a cab. Yeah, it's a very walkable city. I mean, even just getting up the metro, you're walking so long before you get to an exit. It's not like you come up and then like the exit's right there. You're always walking a lot. So really investing in sneakers. I mean, what's cool, you see an array of fashion. Like you see some girl like in a cute dress, whatever, but better believe she's gonna have some sneakers on. Yeah, so I mean, you see shoes, but I think mostly sneakers. Like someone told me that prior to getting here, and I didn't realize. And I find myself now like I was literally in Nike store yesterday. Like, oh, I think I want these. Like I like sneakers, but I never thought that it would be like, oh, I want to get some new kicks so that I can like wear around town. Because you're not really wearing a lot of shoes. It's just such a walkable city, and your feet will hurt if you're constantly in shoes. Your back will hurt. So you definitely need to invest in some like, if you're like a sporty person or just like to look cute, some real stylish sneakers, some kicks, so that you can walk around the city for sure.
Okay. No, that's definitely like a pro tip right here. See, y'all, I asked the questions that need to be asked. I wouldn't have known that. Look, get off the plane to Shanghai with like some cute little sandals that like really ain't good for walking. Next thing I know,
No, you might bring it in a bag. You could, I mean, I do that sometimes. I put it in a bag, you show up at the venue, slide them on. You could do that too, but just like day to day, you can do that. I welcome it. Of course, you wanna wear your heels to the rooftop. I get it, but just don't think you're gonna walk to the rooftop. Don't think.
that's really good. Like that's really good piece of like advice right there. So my final question to you would just be for somebody who's sitting at home in the US right now who is like, I want this lifestyle. Now, maybe they don't necessarily want to teach, but they're like, she has sold me on like Shanghai, or she has sold me on like UAE, or she just sold me on a life abroad. What's the kind of the first steps that I should do to just get myself out there?
I would kind of going back to what you said, I think find out your why.
Mhm.
Find out your why, and then like what are your non-negotiables, like what are you like not willing to deal with, like what is most important to you, because I don't think that any endeavor should be that it's so much that you're giving up so much, because I think you're going to enter the experience feeling so negative or feeling defeated. And especially if you're coming by yourself, like that's a lot to carry to do it by yourself. So I would think about your why. Like, is it because of finances? Is it because you want to learn a language? Is it because maybe you watched a show and you were inspired? Think about what that is. And if you can try to befriend someone that's currently living there so that you don't have like this romanticized idea of what it's going to be, because I do think that people think that once you're an expat, like life is peachy all the time. It's not. But at the same time, it pushes your growth in so many ways that I'm like so thankful for that. So if you also know that you just want to grow as a person, like this is definitely the thing to do. And if you're thinking about coming to Shanghai, please hit me up. I'd be happy to help or assist in any way. But just ask yourself those questions and like be honest and like don't judge yourself, because trust me, everybody was judging me, including myself, about coming to China. And I'm so glad that I followed my intuition, that I'm here. My soul feels really good. And I would have never thought that at all. Okay.
So
So
Nicole, tell us your social media handles too. Don't want to miss that because I'm going to put them below, guys, and I'm going to put them in the description box too for those who are watching, watching or who are listening to the podcast as well.
sweet. You can find me at the Soulful Expat and the Soulful Mind. The Soulful Mind is just to give you some uplifting, thoughts and ideas to live a more soulful life. And the Soulful Expat sometimes includes both things I'm doing, just my day to day, and just like random messages of encouragement and just low laughter.
Oh, and who can't have that in their life, especially right now during these times? So Nicole, I'm so thankful for you today. I'm so thankful that you took time out of your busy evening to have a chat with me. This has been, girl, I've learned, I truly love doing these interviews because I get to meet amazing people, first of all, and then I just learn so much. And so thank you for opening my mind. Thank you for giving me a new and different perspective. And just thank you for being amazing, inspiring other women, other Black women in particular. This platform for me is for Black women. I call it Black Women Doing the Most, just because sometimes Black women doing the most has been used as like a negative. And for me, it's a positive. Like we are doing so many amazing things all over the world that need to be highlighted and celebrated. And so today I'm so thankful to be celebrating all your badassness. So thank you, girlfriend.
Thank you. Thank you for celebrating me and for allowing me to be seen and heard.
No, you are truly amazing. And I know that the world, the universe needs you, is celebrating, is appreciating you. And I know there are women right now who will be listening to this and you will inspire and truly change the trajectory of their lives. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hey, Black girl. Hey, you good? Because I'm fabulous. I'm a digital nomad, and my lifestyle allows my daughter and I to experience new places, culture, foods, and people. Living abroad and or traveling full-time is amazing. It is freedom. I can work from anywhere. I want more Black women to experience the same sort of freedom. I help Black women manifest their dreams of a life abroad or a full-time travel. Are you ready for a life beyond your wildest dreams?